This episode of Lawyers Tell All is brought to you by Law Firm Conversions. If your law firm's phone is ringing, that only means your marketing is successful. It's what happens when the phone is answered that will drive your success or failure. Visit www.intakeacademy.com and claim your free copy of Chris Mullen's groundbreaking book for lawyers and law firms that gets every call converting to become a profitable client, showing you the steps you need to take to ensure the right person is answering the phone and answering it correctly. Welcome to the Lawyers Tell All podcast, where Chris Mullins, the preeminent sales and communications consultant in the legal industry, shows you how it looks through lawyers' eyes. Here, innovators in the trenches provide powerful insights that help you connect with new clients, handle the sometimes harsh realities of the legal profession, and embrace the mindsets needed to succeed. Be sure to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, lean in, tune in, and let's take a deep dive.
Hello, everybody. It's Chris Mullins, the phone sales doctor with Lawyers Tell All in the Intake Academy. And today I am going to interview my friend and a past client, attorney Sharon Christie. And I'm going to read Sharon's bio to you right about now. Okay, so Sharon Christie is a nurse, an attorney, and a business coach for women lawyers. As an attorney, she worked as an associate in a big law firm, a partner in a small personal injury firm, and then she had her own solo practice for 16 years. She sold her law firm in 2021 to start Bold Women Lawyers. Bold Women Lawyers help women lawyers in solo and small practices build a profitable practice that they love. Sharon, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I am great, Chris, and it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me to come and chat with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the first thing that you think that everybody should know about, let's say, women lawyers, solo practices, being bold, all of that?
Okay. So I think that before we get to the women part, just for a solo practice, too often I think lawyers say, okay, I'm just going to go set up my own shop. And that's great. But you really need to understand why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And too often I find that people really don't think about that part of it. They think about the nuts and bolts, which is extremely important, but they don't really spend the time thinking about why am I doing this? and is it really going to meet my needs? I think solo practice is fabulous if it meets your needs. If it doesn't, then you're going to be unhappy. So I always tell clients, listen, let's start with, I'm not talking about your vision necessarily. Sometimes, people want to get into that, but let's get to the basics. Why are you doing this? And it could be, I couldn't find another job, or my law firm split up, or I have always dreamed that I would start my own practice, and that's why I'm doing it. But you have to understand why you're doing it to figure out if it really is the right step for you. And even if your answer is, I couldn't find another job, okay, fine, that's okay. But let's get beyond that. And what is it that you really want to do with your time? And how is running your own law firm going to serve that purpose for you?
Okay, so let me just rewind for a minute then.
Sure.
What's the why behind Sharon Christie doing what she's doing now?
Doing what I'm doing now? That's a great question. And I'll tell you exactly what it is. The why for me is I want to be the person that I couldn't find when I was struggling through a number of issues in my law firm. And you and I met through a mastermind that I was in many years ago with a great mentor where I learned a tremendous amount about marketing, which was wonderful. But I found that, and that group was mostly at the time men. Okay. Which is great. As I say to, everybody that asks me, they're like, well, do you have something against men? I mean, I don't. I love men.
Yeah.
I married one. He's a great guy. That's not the point. In business, women think differently. We approach problems differently. We have different goals and aspirations that many of our male counterparts. And I found a real need for myself to have that female mentor that I could work with and be open with and be honest with about the struggles and the wins, the victories, as I went through this process. And so that's really my why. I want to be that person for women lawyers out there, particularly those in solo firms who have made it to a certain point, but are really struggling, or maybe at the beginning of their journey and are struggling, and they need some help. Just let's get on the right track. Let's get focused on what you need to be focused on so that you can move yourself forward and be happy in your practice.
And I think what you said a few minutes ago about the why for, solo practice owners is critical, because if you don't know the why, and if you can't really agree that, oh, that is the why with yourself, then it's probably not going to work out the way you want it to. And you have to really drill down and just keep saying, why? Well, why? And then maybe have a friend, the ones that you believe that will tell you straight out, what's what, versus just kind of like going along with what you say. Maybe talking to people like that, as well as other, experts, they can help you get to that why.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes it's just too vague of a notion. You've had people say, I just want to make a lot of money. Well, there's ways to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be running your own business. Let's get further, as you said, well, why? What's your goal doing that? And, how do you think running your own practice is going to help you achieve that? Or are your aspirations realistic? I had somebody tell me once, who was in a solo practice, maybe bringing in $20,000 a year, literally, and say, in a year, I want to be at 150 to 200,000. I said, well, is that possible? I guess it's possible, but let's talk about what it's going to take for you to get from where you are now to 10 times or more the revenue that you're currently generating, and what's it going to take, and are you willing to do that? And because you could do it, but it's going to mean a seismic change in the way you're handling your business now. And once that became apparent, then we had a whole different conversation about, do you really want to do this, or is there another option that's going to meet your needs better? And perhaps over time, you're going to meet these financial goals, but not in the time frame that you're setting out, because it's just not realistic.
So that, to me, speaks to mindset.
Yes.
What is it what happened? Like, it's really like having those honest conversations with yourself, asking the tough questions, again, being with people that that are going to ask you the tough questions. They're not just going to tell you what you want to hear. And, well, what happened that we got to 20,000?
Right. That's exactly right. And those are tough conversations. And it's funny, I had this conversation this morning about excuses versus explanations. And there's lots of excuses as to, why, because my family took so much time, because, I didn't feel well, because, but that's different. And that may all be true, but it speaks to where you're putting your priorities. And, it sort of gets back to, how much do you really want this? And the explanation as to why you were at 20,000 and not 200,000 is that when you broke it down and really looked at it, you weren't focused on the right things, and you weren't putting in the time that you needed to do and the work that you needed to do to build up a business. I mean, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen overnight, as we both know. It's a process. It's a process. Yeah.
So what about family? I mean, to me, you have to, to really put the work in and the time in, you got to have a kind of conversation and an agreement with your family, because if they're not there supporting you, it's going to be even more difficult. So how do you handle that?
I think you handle it just the way you just said. You have to have that conversation, whether it's you with your spouse, your partner, whoever it might be, whether it's depending on the age of your children, will they be involved in it, so that they understand that, particularly when you're working from home, just because I'm in the house doesn't mean I'm always available to do the things that you're going to ask me to do. And you have to have everybody on board with understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, but what that means, not just for you, but for them too. Mommy is busy. She's got work to do. When that door is closed, unless it's a life-threatening emergency, don't come in, because it's just as if I was in an office outside of the house and you can't reach me, right? I mean, you could text me, but you can't just walk in. But it has to be an open conversation with your family, with your significant other. And that's not always easy, because it frequently means there's going to be a change in responsibilities. And yet, unless you do that, it's going to be very difficult to try to do all the things you need to do on both sides, family and business, and be successful in both realms.
And this is, you said this a little while ago, but just to kind of expand on it, you probably need to make sure that you ask your family how they think it will affect them in a positive way, and then give them all the examples, even the bigger examples, on how it directly affects them, because they might not be thinking about it. They might not really realize it. They might be thinking like, well, where are you?
Right. Exactly. And that way you have a good flow of conversation back and forth, but you can understand better how they're feeling too, because they may have, just thinking about what you're telling them you're going to do, they may have some fears that you can allay, because they may think you're never going to be here. We'll never be able to take a vacation. We can't, do anything on weekends. They may be having those kind of thoughts, when in fact that's not true. Even though things will be different, it doesn't mean you'll never see me. It doesn't mean, I'm not going to ever be around, or I can't participate. And in fact, there can be great advantages when you can be more flexible with your own time. So I can come to your soccer game, but that, after dinner, then I'm going to need to take some time and spend it, working, because I was at your soccer game, but I can come. I will be there at your soccer game. And that's a big plus for your kids, that you can attend and you can participate.
Yeah. Buy-in is really important, and frequent buy-in. So you might get it at the beginning, but I think you need to have it maybe like quarterly.
No, you know what? In a business, you should be doing like a quarterly CEO business review, right? You should do the same thing with your family. Like, okay, how's it going? Okay, let's see. And not just because of my business. Let's talk about what else is going on with you. Let's make sure you're telling me, and I understand everything that's coming up for you, all of the fun stuff, all of the things that I need to block out time for, to the extent that, you know it, or you can count on a kid to say, oh yeah, mom, on blah, blah date, I need you to do this.
Right.
But just to have that exchange. And the same, with your partner, just sit down and say, okay, how are we doing? And it doesn't have to be a big deal. But it might be a 15-minute conversation, and that's fine. But you set aside the time to do it because you need to make sure you've got that great communication going back and forth.
Which, interestingly enough, is the same exact thing that we should be doing with our staff.
Yes.
The same model,
Yes.
the same
Yes.
check-ins. How am I doing? How are you doing?
Exactly. And I remember when I had my law firm, and we would do reviews, and I would say to the staff, okay, but you need to review me too. We're going to sit down one-on-one. And I did every other week, weekly check-ins with them. But when we did like the review, which was a little more formal, not much because I wasn't terribly formal, but I would say, listen, you need to review me. I want you to tell me 2 things that you think I do really well. And then I want you to tell me 2 things that I need to improve on. And they were really reluctant at first. But the funny thing was, they all were pretty consistent on the things that I could improve on. And if I had to evaluate myself, it was the same thing. I realized yep, the areas where I think I'm not good, I'm right. I'm not good because they're telling me, yeah, if you could, and they would give me suggestions, and for me, it wasn't so much what I was saying to them. It was how I was saying it.
Yeah.
And that had a huge impact, positive impact for me, because it was helpful.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to completely evaluate yourself, but it also made it a 2-way street with my team because, I had great expectations of them, and most of the time they met those expectations, but they had a right to have great expectations from me and to tell me when I wasn't, living up to it. So I appreciated their input.
That's excellent. So let me ask you this. Why did you become an attorney?
Oh boy. That's okay. So
that's
a
loaded question.
Here's the totally honest answer. I was a nurse first, right? I was a nurse. I was an ICU nurse. I loved it. It was, there was always something going on, never a dull moment. But honestly, much of the time I was treated like I didn't have brain cells that worked well together. I mean, that's the best description I could get. And it was mostly by the medical staff, not all of the doctors. Certainly there were some that were great, and they were great collaborators, and we worked together, and it was wonderful. But more often than not, it was, you're just the nurse. And I thought to myself, you know what, this isn't going to work for you. I mean, knowing my personality, that wasn't going to work. And so it was either go to medical school or get out entirely and go do something else. And I had always had an interest in politics. So I thought, oh, I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to get into some kind of health policy position, some think tank or some, government kind of thing to try to help shape health policy, right? So that was my intent. And then I get to law school, and I had so much fun with, at the time they called it trial advocacy, and doing trials. It's like, ooh, I think I'm going to go do that. Yeah. So I went off on a totally different path, but but that was my path to law school. It was, as someone said to me once, it's like you were kind of running away from something. I said, in a way, that's true. I knew I could not stay in the profession I was in for the rest of my working career. So I end up in law school, and then I end up doing litigation, and, little by little, I realized there were just areas of litigation that it was fun while it lasted, but I had had enough. And
what
as
part
a nurse,
of it did you have enough? What part of it did you have enough?
Oh, I had enough of fighting with opposing counsel. It's, honestly, it's obviously I'm representing my client, you're representing your client. But I expect you to be honest with me, and I'm going to be honest with you. And there were times, more than once, that certainly was not happening. And we were fighting fights that I just thought, why are we doing this? If we could be reasonable on both sides, And I always felt like this with the women who were on the other side. If we weren't constrained by some of the other expectations in the law, particularly when I was working on the defense side, we could sit down and pretty quickly resolve this case.
Mm-hmm.
But, you had to be able to bill a certain amount of time when you were on the defense side. And when you're on the plaintiff side, you're always thinking, maybe I haven't scratched every surface I need to scratch. And is the smoking gun really hiding there, even on pretty straightforward cases? And it just, for me, not, and for the people that thrive on it and love it, and I know many of them, and my hat's off to them because they're great lawyers and they do thrive on it. But for me, it just got to be a grind. Just the whole discovery, and it was just a grind that I realized after, quite a long time doing it, maybe I should look around and find and see, what other options I have. And I was very fortunate that I had a friend who also had a solo practice who did nothing but disability cases. And she needed some help, presenting the cases to the administrative law judges. And I remember thinking, well, I don't know anything about disability law, but I certainly know how to present a case to a judge. And this is disability has a lot to do, of course, with medical records and understanding that part of it. Like, well, that's pretty much up my alley. So that's how I got started. And I immediately knew, within the first couple of cases I did for her, I was like, oh, this is what I should be doing. This is where I should be. Awesome. This is it. This is it. Yeah. And so then I started to build my own practice, and that's where I was for 16 years.
Yeah. And so what did you love about your own practice?
Well, I loved being my own boss. I loved being in charge, and for good or for bad, to make a decision, I had to talk to myself about it. Ultimately, I was the decision maker. I didn't have to go to a committee. I set the course, and I would get input from my team, but I would set the course of where we were going, what we were going to do, how it was going to happen, and then we'd be off and running. And, if I made a mistake, I made a mistake. And then you back up a little bit and you go in a different direction. But I really loved the freedom to make the decisions and implement quickly. Because in a bigger operation, you can't move that fast. And so I loved that. And, I had a wonderful team. They were great people and great at what they did. And so we just had a good time together. And that's what I really enjoyed.
That's wonderful. So speaking about team, what's your thoughts on remote workers?
Initially, and I had a virtual assistant way, way, way back. But even with that, I was like, how is this going to work? We're not even in the same state, much less in the same office. We're not even in the same time zone. Like, how is this going to work? But I'll give it a shot. And it took a while. And I realized pretty quickly, okay, again, it's a communication thing. You need to set a schedule, a set time every month, or more frequently if you need it, where the two of you are going to talk and make sure you're on the same page. And that if she's got questions, she can ask you. She could always email me. But there's something about actually speaking to one another that became important. She could give me her suggestions if we were going to, she helped me a lot with marketing. So if we were going to do something new, I'd talk about it, make sure she was completely understanding what I wanted, et cetera. And once I set that up and really was able to set the expectations, it worked great. It worked great. So I never dreamed that you could do it for the whole law firm.
Yeah.
But I realized, as many people did, once COVID hit, Well, yeah, you probably can with that type of practice.
Mm-hmm.
I never had clients who, honestly, for I had my practice for 16 years, so long before COVID came along. 90% of my clients never set foot in the office.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They didn't need to. And these are disabled people. So why would they drag themselves out to go to some lawyer's office if they didn't have to? And they didn't. So that part was easy, the client part. And then I realized, like, wow, once COVID happened, yeah, you can do this remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's great. I think it's much more efficient in many ways. It's less costly. You don't have the overhead that you have when you have everybody in an office setting. What I miss, though, was the camaraderie at an in-person level, that you can talk to people just off the cuff, walking down the hall. If problems come up, they can ask you right away. You can ask them right away. But mostly it was the personal side. That's what I really missed, being remote. But otherwise, it works.
It does work. And I've been virtual since way before Zoom. Everything that I did was always conference call.
Yeah.
Long time ago, way before Zoom, way before COVID, all of that. So it didn't really matter to me. The different members that you have right now, the coaching members, are a good amount of them beginning their practice by doing remote?
It depends on the practice area. Many are. It's easier. Some practice areas are easier than others. So for example, if you have trust and estates practice, you can do a lot of that remotely. You might want to have most people are going to have an office that they can go to when they need it, a conference room for document signing, that kind of thing. Family law is a little different, now I never practiced family law, but just from what I hear from clients, there are many clients, they want to come in, they want to see you, they want to be able to see you regularly. And I think it depends on your clientele and what they expect. So I was recently, now this wasn't a solo practice, but I was recently at a reception for a practice that does mostly trademark and patent work. And so they have, and it's pretty high end, and their client expectations would be to come into a certain type of office setting. And so to meet those expectations, they had that office and it was lovely. But for solo practices in particular, most people are doing some portion of it remotely. But again, it's really meeting your client's needs and the extent to which your clients are more comfortable in a face-to-face setting. And if you're doing litigation, I think you can, for example, I think you can do deposition prep over Zoom fine. But there's something about body language that you read better or entirely in person. And so I think for things like depositions and certainly for trial preparation in personal injury cases, you may be better served by being face-to-face. And if that's the case, then I think you should have a setting where you can do that. You may not need to be there all the time, but you want to make sure that you have that available.
Okay. And so when you talk about mindset, marketing, and management,
yes,
how important is that with the solo practice?
Yeah, I think that's everything. I think that's what you have to build your practice on. Your mindset covers a whole lot of areas, but it is, how are you thinking about your business? What are your expectations? Is your mindset, and as lawyers, we, by training, look at worst case scenario. But as a business person, Yeah, if your mind is always looking at worst case scenario, that's a problem. I mean, I had to, and still do, have to work very hard on that mindset because I have to remember, don't be thinking of this with your lawyer brain.
Right.
Think of this with your business owner, your CEO brain, and don't be always looking at the negative sides of things. You know, look at it from a more positive or forward thinking. Okay, rather than being protective all the time. So your mindset is very important in terms of how you're approaching your business and how you are moving your business forward. Your marketing is, you know, you're the greatest lawyer ever. Okay, that's great. But, you know, you will be bankrupt if nobody knows about you.
Right.
And the only way they're going to know about you is marketing. And, you know, lawyers don't like to hear this word, sales.
Yep.
But that's, you know that, Chris.
Yeah, they don't like sales.
They don't like sales,
scripts,
but
no scripts.
No, but in fact, you are selling personal services. And it's not the same as selling a widget, but the principles, very many of the principles are just the same. And if you are not marketing your services and your practice, then you're going to have a very difficult time running a solo practice because people need to know who you are and why in the world should they ever hire you.
Right.
And then management's all about your processes, you know, from intake, onboarding, right on through to how you handle the cases and then how you not just end the cases, but how you keep in touch with those clients.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, intake and sales and scripts and all of that, whether it's prospects or clients, it's all the same. And
it is all the same.
Important. Yeah, the rules are all the same. Yeah.
Correct. And just because the rules are the same doesn't mean it's not professional.
Right.
But, you know, in fact, what I found was following your formula and working with my team on intake and intake scripts, it became more professional because we were able to work with, here's the script. Now, what happens when here's a typical objection, we would get from people that would call, let's talk about how you handle that and handle it in a professional manner. So I think that it not only adds to your efficiency, because if you have scripts and processes, it makes it all incredibly efficient, but it helps your team understand, like, now what do I do? They've said X, now what do I do?
Yeah.
So I could work with them to say, here's how you can handle it. And you can, they would put it somewhat in their own words, but here's how you handle it. Here's the point you want to get across.
So let me ask you this. So in your program, are you teaching your clients the importance, marketing, but also saying sales to them and teaching them how important it is? And you got to have it.
Yes. And it depends on where somebody is, in their practice. And some people already get that, but many do not. And so I spend time with them working just on those issues and helping to create, what is it that you need? You need an intake script. Okay. Right. After I work with them and let's work on that. We've worked through how you handle a client. Looks like where things are falling through is in your onboarding. Let's work on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Or let's work on your marketing. And frequently it's, let's start out with what's your niche or niche, as I call it.
Yeah. Right.
Because too often there isn't one. And, I'm working with clients to help them understand that it's all about, niching is all about marketing. And so once I figured that out, it made all the difference. And it doesn't mean that, my focus was on clients who had specific medical problems. So, multiple sclerosis was one in my disability practice. That was one area that I was really focused and really niched down on. does that mean when somebody called me that had, failed back syndrome, I wouldn't take the case? Of course not. But what it did mean was my marketing was very specific to people who had certain conditions. Same thing with whatever somebody's practice area is. It might be, and they say, well, I'm a trust and estate lawyer. And I was working with a client who said, well, I said, well, who's your market? Anybody over the age of 18 who needs a will. And I said, well, that's who you can serve. No question of that. But if you're going to try to market to that range of people from their 20s to their, 70s or more, it's going to be impossible for you to be able to craft a message that really speaks to all of those people. So, let's dig a little deeper. And then we started talking about, well, who do you like to work with and who do you serve the best, et cetera.
Right.
And from that, then we can work out a process of figuring out who's your ideal client, who's your best client, how can you get more of them? How can you get more of those people? Yeah.
Awesome. So let me ask you this. So for my last question.
Yes.
Can you tell everybody a little bit about your program?
Yes. I'm happy to. Thank you, Chris. So my company is Bold Women Lawyers. And if you go to my website at boldwomenlawyers.com, there's lots of information there, but there's a freebie there that I'll get to in a minute. But I work with clients in one of two ways. I work with clients on a one-on-one basis for 6 months at a time to develop, depending on where they are in their practice. And so that's where it becomes customized. So we'll do an initial, lengthy onboarding process to figure out where you are and what are your top 2 to 3 needs and goals that you want to meet in the next 6 months. And then we work out a program to do that. And we have weekly calls that clients schedule depending on, what their schedule looks like. But we have weekly calls to see where you are, what do you need, what's the next step forward to get you to that goal. Halfway through that process, so 3 months into it, is, we do a full review. Where'd you start? Where are you now? Are your goals the same for the next 3 months, or have you already achieved that and we need to change what that 6-month goal is? So that's the one-on-one, really customized and pretty intense process. And that's for people who know they need to move forward and know they need some help with implementation and really accountability, because that's where the biggest problem is. You can tell yourself what you need to do, what you need to do, but it's hard to hold yourself accountable.
It is.
And when you hit those stumbling blocks, to keep moving forward. So that's my primary program. The other program is what I call intensives, and we can do a half day or we can do a full day, but it's for somebody who says, I have got this is my one stumbling block. This is everything else I'm doing okay with, I'm happy with, but I've got this one issue, and it could be related to marketing, it could be related to team, it could be related to processes, but I've got to get this solved because I can't get over this hump. And so we'll either do a half day or a full day intensive to totally focus on that problem, to come up with the action plan or the blueprint that they will implement themselves. But we will have a fully, worked out plan for them to deal with that problem and move forward from there.
Wonderful. It sounds great. I mean, you're taking care of people privately and people that just have 1 or 2 situations. They just need to know that they can come to you and call Sharon, and that's great.
Exactly.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any last words for everybody?
Yes. So I do have a freebie. If you go to my website at boldwomenlawyers.com, there is, you'll see where you can download my success guide. There's lots of tips in there, business tips in there for you. So please, take advantage of that. And, my word of advice for people in their own practice, is this. If you know that, you know your why, and you're having, you feel like you're lost at times, get help, because you know your why, you know what you want to do for yourself, for your family, and for the community that you serve. But don't beat yourself up, because this is a typical lawyer thing, thinking, I should know how to do this. Right. I should be able to solve this problem. We do this all the time. There is no shame in saying, you know what? I need some help with this, and then I can move forward. So do yourself a favor, whether it's me or somebody else, doesn't matter. Do yourself a favor and get the help that you need so that you can be happy in your business. Because if you're not happy in your law firm, in your work, what's the point? Why are you doing it? So,
fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. I enjoyed being with you today.
I loved it too, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, everybody, so long. Thank you again for coming to Lawyers Tell All. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to Lawyers Tell All, where Chris Mullins takes you on a journey with lawyers in the trenches who show you the realities of what it takes to succeed in this chaotic, crowded, ever-changing profession. Remember to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Lawyers Tell All.